Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Perceptive podcast series here on Game Wisdom, where we some of the art and science of games. For tonight's conversation, we are talking with someone working on, well, quite frankly, an adults-only video game. This is our first chat about this kind of genre. We're going to be discussing it, as well as the challenge of making a game that is certainly not for kids on Steam. So, please welcome from Kinky Lemur Games. I'm going to try and say this without butchering it too badly. Exorcista?
No, that's correct. That's correct.
Fantastic. But thank you for, I was asking on social media for guests, and thank you for putting your name in the hat there.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Mm-hmm. So, since this is your first time on, and we'll be discussing this game, could you talk a little bit about who you are, what is kind of your role on the team, and of course, for the people listening, what is the game that you are currently working with?
Yes. Inheritance: Ladeina's Path. It's an adult-only game, obviously. No children allowed. My role on the team currently, I am the lead voice actor for Astarte, which is our main character. I was originally hired for that voice, but further on, I actually became part of the writing team. So, there you go. The gameplay, we started out with a small demo because our team is very unfunded. We do have a Patreon, but most of the money goes right back into the game. We wanted to create a world that would make people kind of like The Witcher. That was our original thought. Some people often refer to us as Skyrim-like, even. But we wanted to take those types of games and add more porn to it, basically. More adult features. I know most people nowadays, they consider a porn game to be just a 5-minute fap and that's it. We wanted to be more than that. We actually have a deep story that we're working on. Season 1 wasn't so much... since it was just a 15-minute demo, we didn't have a lot of playthroughs, even for it being free. We had some feedback, which was great. And we took that feedback and developed Season 1.5. That's when we switched to Unreal Engine 5. And we also improved our gameplay there with hack and slash. Some people would refer to it to Dark Souls even. I wouldn't say it's as hard as Dark Souls. I definitely don't like dying over and over again. We're following Astarte as she, the demo starts out with her in a nightmare. But as she goes along, she sees things that she shouldn't be seeing, as in she shouldn't be seeing Shell in these provocative scenes, and she's wondering why this is happening and why these creatures are attacking Polivar, the village, and so on. So she has to figure out further on why this is happening. I'm not sure if you've had a chance to play the game yet, or even tried it, but Season 2, it's more of a challenge for Season 2. We're trying to get that out maybe in the next 3 months. But we're adding more quests, more NPC sex scenes, we're adding a full brothel. We have a lot of challenging things to get through with. And considering our team is only... we have a team of 8 plus 1 sound effects and 1 VA that besides me. That's it. So we'd really, in the long run, our goal, we would like to move past Inheritance, maybe even make an Inheritance 2. We would like to also be a professional game studio, but it's kind of hard getting out there nowadays, especially when you're starting out with an adult game. Most people do not, they either don't take you seriously, they label us as just a bunch of perverted developers, or they consider us to be a scam. So that's some of the challenges.
Yeah, for sure. And it was one of the reasons why I was interested in chatting with you, as this is definitely one of the more challenging aspects of being on Steam. Like, for the people watching this recorded right now, like, everyone knows that Steam has a lot of adult-only games on there. It's on the new releases page. I think there's at least like 3 or 4, like, every day now that pops up on there.
Yes, very much so.
And
And the genres, even for some of them, are just outrageous.
hmm and the spectrum of adult games on Steam is certainly very varied. As you said a few minutes ago, some of them are just there as just here's a bunch of non adults only scenes, like one after another. Enjoy. And then we have seen like a few that have tried to put gameplay in them. There was the oh man, I'm forgetting the name of it. There was a Kickstarter for a game that was trying to be like a XCOM like space game that was also again very hardcore adults only. And the name is escaping me right now. I think like for the people watching this recorded, they're probably typing it into chat or typing into the comments as we speak.
Right.
And the one of the things I guess like the first question I wanted to ask you about, like to go with what you just said about the negative connotations of working on an adults only game, that there are as we said, like there's a lot of people who will immediately dismiss them as again either being just like cheap fodder or it's just there for sex. Like there's no gameplay, there's nothing going with it. So like for like you and the team working on this one, I guess how has it been like trying to get like eyes on this game and trying to promote that it's not just about the sex scenes?
It's been extremely hard, believe it or not. Um, Here lately, we've been getting a few more followers on Twitter, so that's good. But uh, we have a Discord server that's been just kind of dead. We would like to get more community involvement, and we try to get more community involvement, but it just doesn't seem to happen.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't mean we stop trying, but yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I guess like to that point, and again, like for people listening to us, unfortunately, with YouTube also not being a fan of adult-only content, we probably won't be able to show the game or footage of it here. But part of the challenge, I think this also goes with the negative negative view of adult-only games, is that a lot of them go for very graphic depictions. Again, all the trigger words, like YouTube's algorithm loves when you mention them on a stream or video here. And with Inheritance and with the work that you're doing, I guess like the first question is, I'm trying to again phrase this so YouTube doesn't like immediately nuke this discussion. Do you have any again like we're talking about like hardcore depictions of sex? Like, is that a part of this game, or is it? I guess again, like I am not the sex expert here by any stretch of the imagination, but I guess how graphic is like the team trying to aim with Inheritance?
We are obviously trying to get some fetishes in there for those that are wanting them, but we're trying to stay away from certain things that might be taboo, like such as rape. We do not want to promote that. But yes, hardcore porn is definitely something that you'll see.
Mm-hmm. And I did look up the name of the game. It was Subverse. That was the one that I was thinking about earlier. And this was something that I was having conversations with like other journalists and some other developers about a few years ago. And that is kind of like the balance between the game and the sex. And what I mean by that is that, as you were saying earlier, like there's some people who view these games as just it's porn, but with like 2 to 3 added steps to that process. And what is how is the team, I guess, like trying to balance? We want to have an actual game. There should be a core gameplay loop. There should be mechanics. There should be gameplay interaction. But we also want to have, again, like the depictions of sex and however far you want to go with it.
Let's see. It's been rather challenging in the writing department when it's come to that. We've had, I can't say too much on it without giving away plot, but the beginning was. I was first. We had another writer on the team, but then we unfortunately lost him due to health complications, and then it just became me. Mm-hmm. But then our composer decided to help, and not season one, the demo became completely rewritten thanks to our composer. I really, really have to thank him for helping me out on that. And season 2, obviously, we have a giant quest system starting out, and it's the writing and trying to balance the writing and the sex is challenging because we don't want. Obviously, the story is going to draw people in, but we don't want there to be, oh, there's all this sex here. It's so mind-numbing. You just get desensitized by it all. So, for instance, our current season 1, we don't have that many sex scenes involved in the game, but we do have a prototype called Ladeina's Ritual that's going to be implemented in season 2 going forward, where we hope that that feature will allow the players to have sex with whichever NPC that they would like. The ritual as it is right now, it's mainly available to our Patreons, but it allows the players to create their own sex scenes, basically. They have, I think currently Patreons have 10 animations and 2 scenes that they can play around with and create their own sex scenes. And we're still looking for feedback on that because we plan on adding more animations each month to that.
One thing that you've been talking about, I want to kind of clarify for people listening to us, is kind of like the season development of Inheritance. So I'm looking at the store page now for it. So you have the game is currently free to play, or the version that's available on Steam. How, I guess, is the studio, I guess, working like with this like a season format for developing the game?
I'm glad you asked that. I was going to mention it. We are it's a season by season approach. We try to release every 3 months, but because we don't know what's going to happen with developers and their lives and everything like that, sometimes it's delayed. But yeah, we've tried to release every 3 months. I think we are going to try and have a complete game by 5 seasons, maybe 4. But of course, depending on what our funding is, we could go beyond that.
And with, I guess, growing the game and adding more in terms of gameplay to it, what are some aspects that you're hoping to add in from the mechanics standpoint in future seasons?
Well, obviously, the animations we hope to get better. They're really great currently, but we really want to smooth things out. Let's see. I'm trying to figure out what I can say because this is YouTube.
I know.
Certain camera shots for the sex would be added. Certain liquids were mainly the big thing is quest and story. That's the biggest challenge. The sex isn't even that big of a deal to me, but the story is the biggest challenge here.
And I guess with that said, in terms of, I guess, writing a game like this and kind of like building like the story around it, as we've said, like part of the challenge of not only like working on an adults only game, but also trying to, I guess, like keep again like with the negative connotations of it is how much you want to focus on the gameplay, how much you want to focus on the porn and the hardcore elements of it. With like writing and building this game, like, especially for like the people who are supporting it as well. Like, this is something that I've noticed when I've looked at like various forums for some of the games or see people talk about it. Is again like there is this like argument over some people want more gameplay. They want more things to do in the world. They want more of the story, less of like the adult situations. But then, of course, you have that audience who they want as much of that as you can put in, and they could care less about, adding in more boss fights, adding in more mechanics and systems to deal with. Like with the audience that you and your team has built up for Inheritance, like what's kind of been like their view on the game in terms of the gameplay versus the sex?
I wish I could say that they've spoke a lot on it, but the ones that have spoken, I believe that they really like the sex part of it, and they do, or they are interested in the story part. But I guess our goal in the end is to try to cater to both sides of the spectrum. If you want a 5-minute fap, there's your 5-minute fap. You don't have to play the game or you don't have to continue the game to get what you want, if that's all you want. But if you want story, we have that too. So we try to make it even.
One thing that I wanted to ask you about is in terms of kind of like reaching out about a game like this. Obviously, for the people listening, like this is not the kind of game that I would play on stream. It's not one that I would probably play offline, especially with family around. And we've seen, again, like especially when it comes to like people covering games, definitely a kind of like ignoring or not wanting to engage with adults only games. So the question I want to ask you about, in terms of like what the studio's doing or like reaching out to like people who cover games, whether it's through websites, YouTube, Twitch, whatever, has there been like any like I guess interaction on that front with the studio?
Marketing has been quite a challenge. I think the most part we've done, or we've gotten most of our followers from Twitter or X, but YouTube hasn't. We have a couple of videos on there, but not many, and that was from the very beginning because obviously YouTube and their no adult stuff. Overall, it's just been really hard, even reaching out to other streamers. We've tried to reach out to some, and they don't respond, even if they do review adult games. We're not sure why. Maybe they're busy. It's just one of those things.
Yep, and to go back to a point we were saying earlier, part of the challenge of the adult-only genre on Steam is that, again, a lot of the games give off that vibe of low quality. And it's something that has been like a stigma to the genre on Steam because there's so many of them. And regrettably, a lot of them are of very low quality. And I like whenever they pop up on Steam, like the first thing like when my mouse goes over them is I see either like mixed or either goes mixed reviews or they're positive, and that's just like everyone who's just obviously there for the porn side of things. And it is something that I had this conversation about a while ago, that is it possible to kind of square that circle and design a game that is, as mechanically rich as it is, again, about the hardcore sex and such. And, like, with Inheritance and with what your team is doing, I guess, like, do you feel like there is a legitimate market for games like this on Steam?
Yes, obviously, very much so. Before I was even hired for this position, I I personally had wanted a game like this, not because I'm so interested in porn, but because I feel like, for instance, Dragon Age Inquisition. I'm not sure if you've ever played that game or have seen it played or anything like that. They have somewhat sex scenes in there, but because there's no genitals shown, it's not necessarily porn. So that's how they get away with it. But I've always wanted a game that had more to it than that. Adults are adults. Let them be adults. If they're not hurting anybody, let them do what they want.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that is a good point, that these games are, again, like, for people listening to us, they are very obviously not aimed at anyone under the age of 18. And it is still that kind of stigma when it comes to, like, pop culture. Like, here in the United States, of course, that, violence is fine, sex is not so fine when it comes to our entertainment.
Yeah. To me, it's kind of backwards in a way. And some people would want to see both at the same time, so there you go.
I do love, like, the real challenge, or the real, like, game of this interview is how can we talk about this stuff without YouTube just shutting the video off immediately?
Right. I think we do have a trailer that is safe for work that you might can show. I'm not sure. You can look back at it and see. I'm not too sure about YouTube's algorithm and all that, but I'll definitely send that to you.
All right. So I guess as a question about, like, the team itself, do you know if the team, like, worked on any games prior to Inheritance, or is this, like, the studio's, like, first, like, actual game project?
The studio Kinky Lemur Games, this is our first project, but we have devs that were on other projects before. Not porn games. This is our first complete porn game. But the other games that they were on, I can't remember off the top of my head what they're called, or if they're even on Steam. But I know one was like a side scroller type game. But that's all I can remember.
All right. And I guess, like, as, like, a point then, with kind of the implementation of the hardcore elements, and again, we're going to have to try and say this without YouTube getting too crazy about it. With, like, implementing that kind of stuff into the game, how, I guess, like, what is, like, trying to think again, I'm how to phrase this safely. What is, like, the process of deciding what to add, or how far, how much, how little, in terms of, like, building a game like this? Because obviously, with Inheritance being adult only, it's not a case of, well, what if we go too far? Like, you're not exactly worrying about getting an adult only rating at this point on Steam. So, like, once that limitation is, like, not an issue, what is, like, that part of the development process like?
I feel like it's pretty free. It's freeing, in all honesty. We can basically add whatever we want past that, and, well, other than or subjects that are taboo. Obviously, you don't want that.
So, with, like, the team itself, like, I guess, again, like, so this is definitely one of the more. I'm glad we're doing this, like, right at the end of 2023, because this will be, like, one of the interviews I'm going to remember in terms of challenge of talking about. In terms of, like, creating this, like, as you said, there's no real, like, limitations or anything like that, other than, going way beyond. And again, all the YouTube algorithm is, like, giving me the side eye right now as I'm trying to talk about this. how, like, do you get like any like thoughts from like the people who play your game? Like, how do you say, I guess, like, what's next in terms of what you want to add with Inheritance?
The main thing, we tend to go to our patrons first since they're basically the ones funding the game at the moment. We ask them first what they would like, and it's mainly sex most of the time. We try to add that in. And then after that, we try to work around our quests and stuff and the story. Basically, like I said before, we try to make it all even. We Our other writer does find it challenging to add sex into everything, but you do what you can.
So one thing that I wanted to ask you about that just popped into my head is, like, to go back to the point about the spectrum of adults-only games on Steam, that there are games that are just nothing but images. Like, there is no game to it. It's just, here's your porn, here's all your hardcore stuff. Give us $2.99, $4.99, $10.99, something along those lines. And then there are some that have tried to build an actual gameplay system around them, whether it is small or a major focus of it. So what I want to ask you is, like, in your opinion, like, what do you view as the difference between like a bad adult only game and a good adults only game?
In my opinion, the bad ones are just straight up porn, but they're not. The graphics aren't that great. They're very low quality. It's just like they're just putting something out there to get your $5 and be done with you. I don't really enjoy those. In my opinion, if you want a really good porn game, it would have story as well as porn to keep you engaged, not just a 5-minute fap.
Mm-hmm. And trying to, again, like, create a game that is like balanced around that is certainly a challenge. And I guess, like, there's another question there that I want to ask you. In terms of the actual gameplay itself, and again, if you're not sure about this, that's fine. With building the gameplay for something like Inheritance, again, as we've said, there is that balance that has to be struck between the gameplay, the story, and obviously the porn side of things. With the gameplay potential of the game, how is the team, like, I guess, building like depth or difficulty in it? Like, is the game meant to be played by someone who's looking for both hardcore gameplay and hardcore sex, or is it being done more like on the later side? Because it also, again, gets back to that kind of negative view of adult games in general on Steam. That, again, a lot of them, if there is gameplay, it's, take 2 steps forward, here's your sex scene. Press the next on the key, here's more sex. And that's like the extent of their design.
No. Ours, basically, we have a lot of combat involved before you see much of any type of sex scene. There's a little bit in the beginning. I wouldn't even call that much of a scene, like 10 seconds. It's just there. And then I think the first boss of the season 1, you have your first big sex scene. And let's see. I think there's 2 others. I think we have 3 scenes, 3 big sex scenes all together right now. And but between each one, there's a lot of combat. It's not just, play, 2 minutes, here's your sex again. You actually have to put some thought into it, or I'd like to think so.
And with, I guess, trying to add like more mechanics and systems to Inheritance, as we've said earlier, that you are, or the studio is planning on adding in more content as the seasons go on. In terms of like gameplay depth, like, where's, like, I guess, kind of like the ceiling that the studio is aiming for? Because we've said, again, like, some people you probably aren't going to compare this to like the Dark Souls of adults only games, but where are you going, or where's like kind of like the goal in terms of the mechanics side of the game?
Oh gosh. I'm not too sure on that, to be honest with you.
Okay.
Um I suppose it would be limitless depending on what our patrons would want and going further with funding, but yeah.
As you said, the game is kind of being made around like the seasonal approach. Right now, you have it. It just released last month, or at least the release date on Steam is showing me for November 25th. What is like the current season of the game right now?
um we are currently in season 1.5.
Mm-hmm.
And we say that because season 1 got completely redone and switched over to Unreal Engine 5 and added more lore and all that. But our demo didn't, or our first 10-minute, 15-minute demo released in November of last year.
For people listening, like, what is your plan? I guess when will like season 2 of the game come out, or like what's like the whole plan for that?
Q2 of 2024, we're anticipating on having a season 2 Patreon early access release, and then maybe Q3 we'll have the Steam release of season 2, with season 3 being released to Patreon.
Okay.
Again, that 3 months in between, it's really ambitious, but we're aiming for that.
All right. And I guess here's a question that I'm sure, like, I think I kind of know the answer to it, but are there any plans to port this game, or will it actually, again, like, keeping with the adult-only theme, like, is it possible, like, to port a game like this to other platforms, or are the, like, major platforms still very much, if it's adult-only, no, like, we're not putting it on there?
In my opinion, I think the major, like the other consoles and platforms like that, I think they're still very much no on that.
Mm-hmm.
But I would like to, like to hope that our game would push the limits into admitting, like having the other platforms admit that, hey, there's more to this than just porn. There's more, like there's story involved and everything like that.
Mm-hmm. And I guess, like, for like the final question then for you before we wrap things up, has the studio thought about like what they would like to do next once Inheritance is done?
Um, if Inheritance is a success, we would like to possibly do Inheritance too. There has been discussion of possibly doing other games, not just porn games, but other games in general. We do not know what those would be yet, obviously,
Mm-hmm.
but we have high hopes and dreams.
All right. So, before we wrap things up, anything else you would like to bring up about Inheritance, design, anything that is, I guess, safe for work for YouTube's ears?
No, I actually think we covered everything.
All right. So, with that said, to start to wrap things up for the conversation, for people who may be interested in this game, anything you want to mention in terms of social media, sites, links, stuff that I can put in the podcast notes down below?
Yes, I can send links to you. We're available on Steam. We're available on Itch.io. We have a Patreon. We have a Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure what other socials we have, but if we have them, I'll get them to you.
All right,
Definitely.
sounds good. And I will have to check to make sure if YouTube allows me to post links to adult-only games from Steam. But we shall see. It'll be certainly a fun one on that point. So, I guess anything you would like to say to take us out on regarding Inheritance, working on an adult-only game? Any final thoughts from you?
Um, be kind to be kind to indie developers because we're doing our best.
Mhm. All right. Well, I think with that, we will wrap things up for tonight. Again, I would like to thank you for coming on, and I wish you guys and everyone on the team best of luck with working on Inheritance.
Oh yeah, thank you for having me.
And for people who are watching us, if YouTube still has this video up on Steam or on YouTube, thank you so much for tuning in. As always, if you are new to the YouTubing stuff, check out our Discord and our Patreon for our game recommendation newsletter. If you are an indie dev working on a game and would like to come on and talk about it, or any part of the game dev process, does not have to be adults only. It can be the entire spectrum of the ESRB rating. Please reach out. I am always looking for guests. So with that said, everyone, thank you for tuning into this episode of the Perceptive Podcast. Come back for daily discussions on game design here and on game wisdom, where some of the art and science of games. And until our next chat, take care.